Hey guys, it's Reverend Sean, and today we're going over the next section of our little cheat sheet here. We're going to go over the 5+ precepts. So stick with me. Let's take a walk on the path. Today we're going over the 5 precepts, but in other forms and other traditions, there's actually more. And depending on your level of activity, I would say in the Sangha, you can have even more than that. So the first 5 are what are called the lay precepts, or the precepts for people who become Buddhists. And remember, becoming Buddhists, we take the 3 refuges, the refuge in the Buddha, the refuge or the training precept, and the training promise in the Buddha and in the Dharma and in the Sangha. The Sangha is the community, right, that we're committing to learn from and to participate in. So the 5 precepts is the next step. You take the precepts and you would get actually a Dharma name in some of the traditions. The Theravada tradition, for example, there are 5. In general Buddhism, there's always 5, the 5 main precepts. And I'll go over those piece by piece. But in Mahayana, as you get the next step, you can take the precepts again, or the next 3, which is the total of 8. And then you're going to do, for ministers, you take 2 more minimum. Now you could take as many as 14 sometimes, but they tend to be repetitive and they tend to overlap a lot. But when you become a monk, there's 200 and some odd, I can't remember whether there's 200 and something, depending on which group you're talking about. And there's even more for women, because women have other things they have to deal with in daily life, as well as in like menstrual periods and things like that. So let's get going on those. The first of the main precepts that we take is the precept, which means means before, right? And then sept means head, really. Is before your head, before you think. Before you act, we have to think. We have to preconceive these things, and they're more training precepts than anything. So if you break them, remember the locus of control is with you. It's not from the outside. It's not thou shalt not, or you should do this because I said so, because someone else said so. You're taking the precept. You're taking this as a thing to think about and to work on not doing. That's why we say abstain from or refrain from. We don't say not or anything like that, because that's a little too heavy, and that's not the middle path, because there's some times when these things can change, and I'll explain that too. The first precept is to refrain from taking a life. Okay, now taking a life, we think of going around killing people and stuff like that. Well, yes, of course, that's it. But also taking a life can be, like, for example, if you took the flies off a wing, you've taken its ability to live. It can no longer fly. It may not kill the fly immediately, but you're also causing into motion an entire cycle of karmic actions, which are not good, right? So we're going to take the life of that being. We're trying to remember this is like, don't take a life, don't allow a life to be taken if you can, and we're doing that through loving kindness. We're trying to learn and understand that all beings fear death. Okay, all beings want to live into the next moment, and so we're trying to respect that, and we're trying to see ourselves respecting that, and see that we not only want to live in the next moment without suffering, but we want to allow and help others to live into the next moment too. So number 2, then, that's the first precept, the precept of refraining from taking a life. The second one is refrain from taking what is not given. So now this doesn't mean just stealing. This could also mean you find something on the ground and you pick it up. It's not yours to take, so you leave it there. Now this is also a part of generosity and also wisdom, because we don't want to take things that aren't ours. And this could be also, usually it has to do with material items, mostly is what we think of, okay? Refrain from taking what is not given. Now also maybe coercion probably could be in part of this, but I think it's easier to think of like material goods, okay? Like if someone sends money and you didn't ask for it, well, is it right for you to take it or not? That's really up to you. But there is a karmic debt or a karmic action, or action we're putting into motion. We have to be little. This is the development of wisdom, right? Okay, so we're doing wisdom and also non-attachment, okay? Because we're going to have to link all these back to everything else. And the third of the precepts that we take is the precept to refrain from harmful speech. Now, it just doesn't mean lying, because there could be a point where someone comes in and says, hey, I'm looking for you, for example, and I want to hit him on the head. I want to kill him because of I'm a bad guy. Now, if I say, well, I have to tell the truth, he's right here, or you're right here, then that's actually not helping, right? Now, I could not speak. That's also refraining. Sometimes silence is the best answer. Now, if I do say, well, you know what, I think he went to another town or something. Now, that's lying. You're not telling the truth, but it's also you're avoiding some harm, hopefully. Now, hopefully we can think ahead, and we're using, again, our compassion and our understanding of people to see that this person is frustrated or upset or angry, and we may want to try to appease them or console them, try to make them see, because remember in Buddhism we try to convince people, we try to show them the wise side, we show them the compassionate side, but sometimes people won't listen, so you have to choose what you need to do, and that's all part of the middle path. The fourth one we have is to abstain from harmful passions of the body. Okay, now this would be like perhaps we're working on contentment and kindness, of course, again, like harmful sexual practices that harm others or yourself. Now, that isn't to say that like sometimes some tension is good for that kind of thing, but to have interaction with someone inappropriately. Okay, there's inappropriate times, there's inappropriate places, there's inappropriate people, and that could be someone that is already taken or lives in their parents' house. Those kind of things are actually refrained from in Buddhism. It's actually very specific about who not to mess around with, if you will. I mean, if they're two adults that are consenting, and then they can do whatever they like, basically, as long as it doesn't harm themselves or others. That's what they have to think of. And again, here we're trying to think of development of wisdom, also the development of compassion and kindness. The fifth one here is to refrain from intoxicants that cause heedlessness. This is a big one. Now, taking meds is different from taking drugs. Taking drugs makes you heedless. Now, you can use them as a medicine, for example. If people are using like psilocybin or something like that to help with depression, that's perfectly fine because it's used as a medicine. But if it makes us heedless, that's the point. Now, even alcohol, this was in those, many people say that it was based on a very specific drink that was made in the time of the Buddha. But we have to, that's the loophole that people try to get out of all the time. Well, I don't have that drink, I'll just take some whiskey. You can drink those things, you just don't become heedless, you don't become drunk. Okay, you don't become attached to them. We're releasing our attachment. We're trying to use some wisdom. We're trying to see that if those things make us without heed, we're not in control of our faculties, we do stupid stuff. And that's what we don't want to do. We can hurt ourselves. We're trying not to hurt ourselves, and we're trying not to hurt others. That's the whole idea of this. We're trying to live in a sangha and follow the middle path and follow the choices that are wise and will help us reduce suffering. Very simple, right? So to expand on those, in Mahayana, remember there's Theravada, which is the old school, and then in Mahayana, which is called the greater school. It's kind of like newer, a little bit newer. There's three more. All these are they're more in depth, and you may take them later on as you become a little bit more involved in the sangha. And the number 6 one here is not to eat at the wrong times. Now, eating at the wrong times, what the hell does that mean? That means overindulgence, really. Okay, we're not trying to be a glutton, and trying to eat wrong foods at the wrong times and stuff. And it has to do with some dietary things, which do help you on the path, right? Because the better health you have, the better you are. Now, in many of the Buddhist traditions, you can't eat after the zenith, which is noon. So after the sun hits the highest point, you don't eat for the rest of the day. And that can be really difficult, especially if you're traveling. If you're traveling by jet, you may leave and not have eaten and then get somewhere, many hours later and missed the morning where you can't eat again. So we have to have some flexibility with these kind of things. Also, many times, too, they'll restrict things like no onions, no garlic, no meat, no eggs. Meat makes sense, right? One, it does increase internal fire. Onions and garlic, also because you're with a group, you're meditating perhaps, and you're breathing and farting or whatever it is. So we don't want to kind of, mess with those kind of things too much. We reduce those things as best we can. Now, some cultures and some groups eat a lot of meat. They eat a lot of onions. They eat a lot of garlic, and it's very good for them. They need that. If you're going into the Tibetan plateau, for example, where there's not a lot of fresh vegetables traditionally. Now you can go to markets, apparently, but, and find fruits and things like that out of season. But if you can't find things out of season, we have to follow what we can to survive, but we want to reduce those things. Number 7, the next one is to not sit in high beds or high places or expensive, ornate thrones and things like that, or sit on animal skins. Now, there's many reasons for this too. One, because we're trying to be humble. We're trying to be honorable. We're trying to be very relaxed about our way. And number 8, not to adorn with makeup, jewelry, a lot of fancy stuff, do our hair crazy, nice, and too much makeup and things like that. We're trying to be, again, subtle and in the middle path. Now, the last 2 ones that we would do is to avoid places of what we call ill repute, so like a burlesque show or strip shows, gambling places, big parties and things like that. We try to reduce those because those can cause problems. If you've ever been to clubs, there's always a fight and something like this, and it may be fun, but there's always some problems. So we're trying to avoid suffering and avoid problems. And the last one we have for this is to avoid abuse or waste of donations. These last 2 really are for ministers, my level, priests, kind of thing. We don't do big parties. We try not to be seen at them because you don't want to be like, hey, he's a party animal. This is a priest, a minister. He's out there. He'll yuck it up with the rest of us and get into fights and stuff like that. We don't want to do that because we're trying to have that honor to respect my teachers and my tradition and Buddhism itself and my people, my people. The last one is the. Wow. Okay, sorry about that, guys. My battery actually died and the computer turned off, so we'll redo the last 2. The last 2 more of the precepts are for ministers, mostly, and deacony kind of levels, that kind of thing. And the number 9 is avoid places of ill repute or gambling dens, burlesque shows, strip shows, stuff like that. It makes sense, right? You can go to a show, you can go to a comedy show, but you don't want to do too many off-color things because you're trying to set an example for the people that you work with, and you're trying to help them live better lives too. So we don't want to contribute to any of that. And it contributes to gambling, taking what is not yours, perhaps taking what is not given, and also maybe harmful sexual or emotional abuse kind of things, with a strip club or something like that. So, but those are all these moral things that we try to follow. And the 10th one, the last one for ministers, is actually to avoid waste of the donations and money that you receive from your parishioners. Now, many people, they survive based on this. Many ministers and monks and nuns and other Dharma teachers, they rely on the donations of people like you. And if you want to donate to us, you can, through our Venmo or through Patreon. But you want to make sure that you're not wasting that money and buying frivolous things and Gucci handbags and flashy glasses and the newest phone and those kind of things. We deserve to live in this world, yada yada, and all that kind of stuff. But do they deserve the opulence that people really get upset about? And this is one of the things that brings people to Buddhism too, is that it's a life of simplicity. We're trying to be more simple, and with simplicity comes releasing a lot of the attachment to the things that we have, because the things eventually that we own eventually own us, and we don't want to do that. We want to use them as tools, not as toys. So anyway, that's what happens if you break a precept. Okay, let's go back a step. After that, we have even more. There's Vajrayana has a whole set of other ones based on those 2. That's condemning others or speaking ill of the Buddha, speaking ill of other teachers, things like that. Failure to practice is also a precept. Some of them, if you break them, you just have to work hard to fix it. Don't do it again. And what can you do to fix it? What can you do to progress? Other ones you profess to a good friend, to a Dharma friend, to a Dharma teacher, and you say hey, how can I do this? This keeps happening, and that's a point of practice to make our lives better, right? And some of them you do get kicked out, especially with as a monk or a nun, you can lose your robes for many of these, and then there's many more, of course. With the monks and nuns, there's a couple hundred more that are added onto these. So anyway, hopefully that got you the information that you need on the precepts and how they kind of work and how we can apply them to everyday life, because that's the whole idea of what we're doing here, right? Don't forget to subscribe down below. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a thumbs down if you don't like it. Give me a comment in the bottom, or some constructive criticism if you like, or questions, and I'd be happy to answer them. This is Reverend Sean over the Centered Path, and I want you guys to be happy and wise and wealthy and good and whatever, and just have a nice time. Learn something, do your breathing, do your meditations, and we'll talk more about those next time on the Centered Path.